to our next track. This track will take you through the role of Indian universities and academia in capacity building in Asia and Africa. This is a special session of critical importance to us at SIU. The session is chaired by Professor Rajen Harshe. Sir is a visiting professor at Department of International Relations, South Asian University. A Fulbright scholar at Columbia University, New York, his areas of research interest include theories of international relations, globalization, development, and comparative area studies with special reference to Afro-Asian countries and India's foreign policy. The speakers on this track are Shri Jitin Prasada, Honorable Minister of State for Human Resource Development, Government of India, His Excellency Dr. Joseph Butore, Minister of Education and Scientific Research, Burundi, Shri Ashok Thakur, Secretary, Department of Higher Education, Ministry of Human Resource Development, Government of India, and Ambassador H.H.S. Vishwanathan, Distinguished Fellow, Observer Research Foundation. I would request Professor Rajen Harshe to kindly take over the session. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted today for a number of reasons. One, Pune is my city. I was born here. I studied in Fergusson College. And while I was studying in Fergusson College, Professor Muzumdar also was teaching there. So it's a double blessing. I feel so happy. After coming here in the morning, I saw the amount of effort he has made towards higher education, towards bringing different countries and students from different countries together. Somewhere kind of, thinking of Mandela, we always think of rainbow nation. And somewhere so many colors and so many types of students around make this place really wonderful place for intellectual activities. I am extremely grateful to Professor Muzumdar, Professor Devre, Vice Chancellor Gupte, and Vidyaji for inviting me. This is a rare privilege to be here. 2 or 3 things I would like to say about today's speakers. Honorable Minister Jitin Prasad, who he could not come because of some unavoidable circumstances and tragedy in his house. But we have 3 other speakers. I would start from Honorable Minister of Higher Education, His Excellency Mr. Joseph Butore. I think he has had a very diverse and versatile career. While seeing his CV, I could realize that biotechnology, veterinary sciences, so many areas in sciences he has kind of actually worked with. He has been doctorate in veterinary sciences, and subsequently, as you kind of get chance to be minister in a country, he will have some agenda to execute. So I think we will be interested in hearing what he has to say on this area. And welcome, sir. The second speaker is Shri Ashok Thakur. Now, one thing I can tell you about him, while I was Vice Chancellor in Allahabad, he used to be also in Ministry of Human Resource Development. But subsequently I began to know him because of some committees, and I heard him recently in Istanbul, and what a wonderful speech he gave. And he's one of those persons who is concerned about striking balance between quantity and quality in higher education, and concerned about the institutions in India, the way they are functioning. So we will have interesting speaker in him too. And then we have Ambassador Vishwanathan, who is Distinguished Fellow in ORF. Most important point that struck me of his was I had an occasion to listen to him in Lagos. His fair degree of control and grip over what is happening between India and Africa. Something which many of our African students are absolutely going to enjoy. And he's a man who is eloquent speaker, and he does it with economy of words. So all the 3 speakers will make a tremendous panel today, and even though it is evening, I'm sure you will not feel tired at all. It will be a very, very enjoyable session. Few points I would just like to make by way of beginning, and I'll hand over the mic to main speaker. One is globalizing world, interdependence in this area, and internationalization of education has been well harped constantly. Now, in this internationalization process, how can India contribute in different countries in terms of sharing its knowledge, its faculty, its resources? That's a question at hand. In India itself, there is a kind of mismatch between demand for higher education and supply of institutions which deal with higher education. A tension which I am sure Ashok Thakurji is going to handle. Similarly, something like, striking balance between quantity and quality, this also is a kind of issue at hand all the time. And yet India is making march ahead in Africa. Institute of Foreign Trade like institution is coming there, diamond related institution, information technology. Narayan Murthy had gone all the way to Africa to do some work in IT. So things are happening around in this field, and somewhere how we can keep population in India which is below 35 and involved and interested in education, keep them engaged here and also share their talent across the world in a world which is rapidly globalizing. That's a challenge before us. How we share resources without exploitation, but with mutually beneficial partnerships with several developing countries, whether it's infrastructure, faculty, staff, or any area. I think this is a very exciting area for young generation. Now let me not stand between you and all the three distinguished speakers. I would request the Honorable Minister of Burundi to come and give his expose, and subsequently the two speakers will follow. I'll just watch and enjoy what goes on in the proceedings. Thank you so much.
Yeah, okay. Do you want to use a laser pointer? Sir? Laser pointer, do you want to use?
Okay, no problem.
Pointer which you can point to.
Okay. Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear members of different faculties and institutes of prestigious university, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon or good evening. Before sharing with you the Burundian experience in higher education, I'd like to use this opportunity to thank the organizers for inviting me for this international event. My thanks also go to Mrs. Ambika Vishnav and Dr. Sandy Wasrekal, who I think they told about me the first time to the administration of the Symbiosis International University. You allowed to me to visit India for the first time, and yesterday someone told me that this town, Pune, is becoming a culture and academic capital of India. And according or looking to the flags behind me and outside on this conference center, I can add that this town is becoming a diplomatic capital of India. So now let me talk about Burundi. As you know, come from an official French speaker, but according to the respect I have for this prestigious university, I try to comment my presentation in English. So, as you see the picture, we are in the Burundi. The Burundi is situated in the east part of Africa, which borders with Rwanda in the north, Tanzania in east and south, and Democratic Republic of Congo in the west. It's one of the 5 East African Community Partner States, Burundi, Rwanda, Tanzania, Uganda, and Kenya. The area is approximately 27,834 square kilometers, of which 25,950 square kilometers is land. The remaining areas is mostly composed of Lake Tanganyika. The capital is Bujumbura, and the population is around 10 millions. The official languages are Kirundi, local English, and the French, of course, but very, very soon we are going to introduce English. And then you can also speak Swahili in some commercial centers. Burundi is characterized by a hot and humid tropical climate, and the temperature is between 20 and 30 degrees. The rain covering 7 months of the year, from September to November, and from February to May. Main economic activities are agriculture and livestock. So what about the education sector? The education sector system in Burundi is undergoing important reforms at all levels of education. This reform has suitable response to the problem of universal completion based on the fusion of primary and lower cycle of secondary school in a block of 9 years called basic education. As for higher education, the goal is to reorganize the existing curriculum of higher education in introducing the bachelor, master, PhD system, which has launched in 2012, last year. And the creation of vocational short fields for post-secondary school winners who cannot access the university, and the establishment of a strategy of human resource and infrastructure development. Our vision is a quality education suitable to the needs of the country and the sub-region, through the promotion of training and employment suitability by developing technological and scientific subjects, and the fundamental and applied research on one hand, and the implementation of BMD reform on the other. Our mission is a higher education. FROF is the threefold mission of training, research, and services rendered to the community, has many things to offer for the sustainable economic, social, and the cultural development of the country. In the framework of implementation of the tax and objectives assigned to the Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research, 4 areas were identified. The first is ensure quality higher education that will result in the follow-up of the reform and approve the establishment of an appropriate institutional framework. The second is to develop science and technology, through the establishment of a national policy on science and technology. The third one is professionalize higher education, through the creation institutes and schools of higher vocational training. And the fourth one is to promote the research adapted to development. Let's talk now about our main challenges. As in many other areas of national life, the higher education subsector faces some changes, and the most important are linked to supply and demand for training. Because for the moment, we have many young people who would like, after secondary school, to continue in the universities, but we don't have enough places, enough infrastructures to receive them. The second is there are teachers who are not sufficient in terms of quantity and in terms of quality. And the third main challenge is quality assurance, because in some faculties we have old programs, old curricula, they must be changed, and the number of students in some faculties, they are very, very big, and we cannot find sufficient equipment and laboratories in post to organize their lessons in good conditions. So now let's talk about some higher education numbers. Of course, the numbers are not for this year, but for the last year. We have a public higher learning institution, 7, at the national territory, and the private higher learning institutions are 24 for all Burundi. The total number of students population in both public and private higher education institutions were around 36,000 last year, and 33% of them were girls or women. This is illustrating a table about what I was telling. This picture shows the only national university of the country, University of Burundi, which was created in 1964, and in which we can find Faculty of Medicine, Institute of Applied Pedagogy, Faculty of Applied Sciences, Faculty of Agronomy, Faculty of Law, Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, Faculty of Economics and Administrative Sciences, Institute of Sports and Physical Education, Higher Technical Institute, Agriculture Science Institute, and Commercial Higher Institute. I'm not going to make a comment about the numbers of students by faculty, because we take a lot of time. Budget information, I'm not to speak about this because I think they are not necessary for the moment. So now let's talk about the partnership in the field of higher education. Of course, we send some of our students outside in other countries, and we have 2 types of scholarships abroad provided to Burundian students. These are government scholarships and scholarships granted in the framework of bilateral or multilateral cooperation with the host countries. The partnership with India, there is a good relationship between Burundi and India with regard to bilateral cooperation. The exchange program between the government of the Republic of Burundi and the government of the Republic of India on the field of education has been stagnant in 2012. Concerning education, India supports Burundi in a program of teleeducation and telemedicine. I can add that before coming here, we received a new offer, 15 scholarships from India for the next year, 2014. The agreement on the Pan-African project on the establishment of India-Africa Institute of Educational Planning and Administration is underway of implementation in Burundi, and it will be opened next year. Besides scholarships under the bilateral cooperation between 2 countries, there are many Burundian students studying in India in private universities, even if here in Symbiosis International University, I found some Burundian students. So I think we cannot speak about education and not speak about culture. A culture in Burundi is centered on music and dance exalts the virtues of the kingship. This picture, I can call it a national visit card of our country, because if we are receiving the distinguished guest, we usually use this dance. There are drummers who are known now, I think, in almost all the countries of the world. The young people, sometimes they do the dance with our young girls. Tourism opportunities, travel and tourism in Burundi are slowly improving. Burundi has many exceptional natural attractions that are becoming a key focus of the newborn travel industry and of the tourist resources. Apart from its wonderful nature, you find several museums, such as the Burundi Geological Museum in the capital Bujumbura, and the Burundi National Museum, and the Burundi Museum of Life in the city of Gitega, the second town of the country. You can also find many wildlife nature preserves, and the town of Rutana in the east of the country is endowed with a monument to be the source of the Nile River. The authorities are planning and implementing consistent improvements to the tourism infrastructure for private and public investment. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I think he has given such a lovely presentation on the way education is steadily getting organized. And the National University of Burundi was only established in 1964. Long way to go. Very bien. May I now request Ashok Thakurji to give his presentation.
Dr. Majumdar, Dr. Vidya, Vice Chancellor of this beautiful university, faculty members, my esteemed panelist friends, and dear students. The topic, as it is on internationalization and how India can play a role in building the capacity in Africa and Asia. Before I delve on this topic, I would like to give you a brief background of India's higher education system. Let me be very frank that till about 7-8 years back, we were very concerned about the gross enrollment ratio, which is the number of students in the higher education sector itself. We were stagnating at around 12%, whereas the rest of the world, including Asia, was far ahead. And fortunately at that point of time, two things happened. Number one is that the budget of higher education and education as such increased 9 times. that is the funding by Government of India. There was a paradigm shift. I don't know how much of impact that money itself made, but the fact that the government thought that education is very important was critical, especially higher education. So we got 9-fold increase in investment from Government of India. Secondly, the economy was growing at a very fast clip. Never at this speed ever. We almost touched 10% too, and on an average we grew at 8% for several years. Because of this, there was a real boom. There was a big demand for higher education. And on account of this, when we did the count sometime last year, institution to institution, the higher education survey we call it, we are almost touching 20%. So the rate of growth from say around 12% about 7 years back to 19.4% last year was phenomenal. And that made us heave a sigh of relief, because at least in numbers we are growing. And therefore, our target of achieving 30% by 2020 is well within our grasp. So that is the good part. The other aspect, of course, is that we now need to concentrate on quality. The cake has grown, but how does it taste? We need to improve the quality of that cake. And that quality will improve when India not only looks at the systems within the country, we only look at IITs, we only look at IIMs. Surely we need to look outside. We need to open up our doors, windows, our horizon, and see what's happening outside. Of course, there's a completely different story. We have a bill before the Parliament. It is languishing there for, it's called the Foreign Education Providers Bill. It is there for the last 3-4 years. Hopefully, one day it will see the light of day. But the fact is that internationalization is a very important factor if we want to push quality. And when we talk about internationalization, we need to, I'll just like to bring before your notice. Some of you know that each time the Parliament sits in Delhi, everybody, all our MPs, all our ministers, including the President of India, wants to know why India doesn't figure. Even a single university of India doesn't figure in the top 200 universities of the world. Well, they should know, every one of us should know that while ranking process takes place, whether it is the Times Higher Education ranking or it is the QS ranking, apart from research, which is very, very important, and most of our universities are basically teaching universities, they are not research universities. Internationalization, the student profile, the faculty profile is very important. So in that context, today's workshop has been, I think, a fantastic idea. While I was walking around in the morning, attending some of the sessions too, and interacting with the students, I really feel that our ministries, the Human Resource Ministry, the Ministry of Home Affairs, which is in charge of giving visas, etc. to you, to the foreign students, and Ministry of External Affairs, which is supposed to look after all the students who come from foreign countries. I think we need to work together. And I would urge the Vice Chancellor here that the findings of these 2-3 days workshop, the problems pertaining to foreign students, I would like to really take it up separately. We'll have a separate meeting, and also request Symbiosis to hold another workshop for us with all our central universities and all other universities to bring in internationalization absolutely center stage. So it is very, very crucial. Without that, we cannot improve ourselves. There are a few things which I just want to mention in passing about what we have done till now. Like I told you, our foreign education providers bill is before the Parliament. Overall, I think our country has become more and more inward-looking and insular since ever since we have gained independence. We had some universities, some of our universities, some of our autonomous colleges are more than 100 years old. We have a rich tradition, but somehow we have not been able to build on it. So therefore, I think time has come that we should once again work on this and take the concept of internationalization, opening up our doors to the universities more often, hold workshops like this, and have inner confidence. With great difficulty, the Government of India has decided that 15% of the seats in all our institutions would be reserved for foreign students. Well, this is a good step, but we also need to do a lot of hand-holding for this. We cannot just announce it and just disappear, but I think conferences like this, workshops like this will help us bringing all the three ministries together and the university vice-chancellors also to see the problem and how we can improve the quality. We have also told that each university will now, UGC has in fact come up with a regulation that each university will have a international students cell to deal with this aspect. About the infrastructure in our universities, I think that is a big chink in our armor. Institutions like Symbiosis have excellent physical facilities, but most of our institutions, whether they are central institutions or the state universities, I think we really need to upgrade. So in the 12th five-year plan, there is a proposal to set up more and several international hostels in our central universities and IITs and NITs, so that students from abroad who are used to a different level of comfort in terms of living should be provided, and of course gradually improve those same levels of comfort for everybody. We also have an arrangement now. UGC has come up with the twinning arrangement, wherein our universities can collaborate with foreign universities and provide joint degrees, which our earlier objective was to have the foreign education providers bill, but since that did not come through, so now we have brought in a standby arrangement by which such kind of joint degrees are now legally permissible. For Africa, we have taken several initiatives. I think most of them were mentioned in the morning, but I would still like to repeat that the Pan-African e-network project was commissioned in 47 countries, and the telemedicine project under this scheme has been a big success, in which some of our 12 Indian super specialty hospitals are providing services to these countries in Africa. The other aspect is the tele-education. This is another very important aspect, and IGNOU is working on it, And we have, again, in these 47 countries, 5 of our good universities, better universities, have enrolled about 10,000 students for various programs, right from UG, PG to certificate programs. Then there is this project to create a virtual India-Africa university, virtual university, which is at a cost of more than 360 crore rupees. The profile, etc., has been prepared. Now, very shortly, we'll be working headlong to take it further. I think in the end, I will say that it's very important, not only at the national level, to promote internationalization, but at an individual level, it helps build tremendous bridges. For example, I can speak from my personal experience. Part of my studies I've done in France. France is special to me because I've spent some time there. I've mixed with them. Culturally, I can understand the French people and their system of thinking and working. So whenever France is mentioned, one is automatically inclined towards preferring that country. Similarly, we need to have more and more young boys and girls from other countries into our Indian universities so that we build lifelong bridges of friendship, love and development. Thank you very much.
Very well said. Actually, one thing seems to be common between me and Ashokji. I also feel strongly for France because I studied there and it's such a lovely country. I'm sure many of African students who are in Symbiosis, they would also recall India when they go back to their respective countries. And this particular experience which is there in such a wonderful campus. May I now request Ambassador Vishwanathan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Majumdar, Chancellor of the Symbiosis International University, Dr. Rajani Gupta, the Vice Chancellor of the University, Ambassador Sudhir Devre, convener of this conference, and my senior colleague under whom I trained when I was a IFS probationer, Ambassador Prakash Shah, distinguished panelists, distinguished participants, above all, dear students, both Indian and international. First of all, I must thank the organizers for inviting me. I consider it a great honor and privilege to be standing before you here participating in this very big conference. Since I am in the think tanking business, I have attended many conferences, but I can say very confidently that this is perhaps one of the biggest, if not the biggest conference I have ever attended. And the kind of participants, the panelists, and the level of discussions here, I have learned quite a bit in today's proceedings, and I am looking forward to tomorrow. While I was going around the campus, I wish that I was 40 years younger, because in this beautiful campus I could have come and done a postgraduate program. But unfortunately that cannot be now. I am a bit too old for that. Thank you once again, the organizers, for this honor. And I also consider that this conference, the timing of it is very important. Why I say that is because sometime in the first half of next year, we will have the third India-Africa Forum Summit, and the deliberations that we have here and some of the conclusions we arrive at will provide very valuable inputs to the policy makers towards the next summit. I have been asked to speak on the ITEC program. I have nothing new to say because this was mentioned in the morning session, particularly the first session, and also in the various other sessions. So all I would do is to highlight some of the points which has already been said. I would first like to put the ITEC program within the framework of the philosophy of India's partnership with other developing countries. It was a natural evolution of its independence struggle. Both Mahatma Gandhi and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru felt that the true freedom of developing countries will come only through partnerships among themselves. India was in the forefront in the anti-colonial and anti-apartheid movements. After independence, there was a natural affinity towards other colonies which were getting independence from the 1950s onwards. From the very beginning, India was of the view that South-South cooperation, even though that term was not prevalent at that time, that should be based on a new paradigm, and it rejected the donor-recipient model of economic assistance by the developed countries. We prefer to use the term development cooperation, and over the years it has changed, and now we are using the term development partnership. India's development partnership rests on three fundamental pillars or principles. This was already mentioned in the morning. One, it doesn't attach any conditionalities. Number two, it is not prescriptive. And number three, it does not question the sovereignty of partner countries. It is also a voluntary partnership where the two parties are considered as equal stakeholders. Further, it is demand-driven and respects the development priorities of the partner countries. It is in the above context that we have to look at ITEC program and how it has functioned in the last 4 decades. The Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Program, popularly known as ITEC, was instituted by a decision of the Indian Cabinet on 15th of September 1964 as a bilateral program of assistance by the Government of India. The ITEC program, born out of the vision of the first Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, was formally launched under the premiership of Lal Bahadur Shastri. The decision regarding setting up of the ITEC program was predicated on the underlying belief that it was necessary to establish relations of mutual concern and interdependence based not only on commonly held ideals and aspirations, but also on solid economic foundations. Technical and economic cooperation was considered to be one of the essential functions of an integrated and imaginative foreign policy. ITEC program was essentially bilateral in nature. However, in recent years, ITEC resources have been used for cooperative programs conceived in regional and inter-regional contexts. Some examples of this are the Economic Commission for Africa, Industrial Development Unit of the Commonwealth Secretariat, UNIDO, Group of 77, and the G15. ITEC program is fully funded by the Government of India and is implemented by the Ministry of External Affairs. The program has evolved considerably over the last 4 decades. Under ITEC and its associated program called SCAP, that is Special Commonwealth African Assistance Program, 161 countries in Asia, Africa, East Europe, Latin America, Caribbean, as well as Pacific and small island countries are invited to share India's development experiences. ITEC program has 6 main components. One is training, both civilian and defense in India, of nominees from ITEC partner countries. Second is project and project-related activities such as feasibility studies and consultancy services. Third is deputation of Indian experts abroad. Fourth is study tours. Fifth is gifts and donations of equipment at the request of ITEC partner countries. And sixth is aid and disaster relief. Since the main theme of this session is capacity building, I will quickly go through the other components. I won't dwell on them in great detail and come back to training in a little more detail. Under project-related cooperation, India assists ITEC countries on the basis of mutually agreed projects to establish infrastructure facilities with technologies and skills appropriate to their resources and needs. These are generally not capital intensive and environmentally as harmless as possible. These are done under two routes. One is the concessionary loans under the lines of credit, or LOCs as they are called, and the other is outright grants. Feasibility studies and consultancy services on the request of high-tech countries are also carried out. On an average, about 40% of the high-tech budget is used for project and project-related activities. Then Indian experts are also deputed to friendly countries on their request to assist in development activities. Some of the fields covered in the recent years have been military training, IT, audit, medicine, English teaching, telecommunication, etc. Study tours is another activity under ITEC, under which 2 to 3 week programs in specific areas of interest are arranged, where delegates are taken to Indian training centers. Government of India also provides gifts and donations of equipment to partner countries. We have given computers to many African countries, particularly for their foreign offices. And this is also done at the request of our partners. Then in case of natural disasters, Government of India undertakes aid and disaster relief by supplying items like food grains, medicines, tents, blankets, and other essentials. Rarely, ITEC also covers special projects, like the one in Afghanistan, where we have built an hospital and we are running the hospital. And the second was the famous restoration of the Angkor Wat in Cambodia, which was very successful. Now let me come back to the most important aspect of ITEC program, which is human resource development and capacity building. This became a critical factor for two reasons. One, soon after independence, India was itself short of capital, and therefore huge projects in partner countries were ruled out. And the second reason was India had built up several institutions and had achieved a certain level of human resource development which it could share with other friendly partners. The importance of capacity building for developing countries can never be overstated. As Nobel laureate Joseph Stiglitz emphasizes in his recent book, The Price of Inequality, any nation must aim at a harmonious development of its four capital stocks, not just man-made capital that GDP highlights, but natural capital, human capital, and social capital. Under capacity building activity, professional and experts from partner countries are offered unique training in various centers of excellence in India. The training covers both civilian and military sectors. The training empowers them with professional skills which become useful in their career progress, as well as contributing to the socio-economic development of those countries. There are 47 empaneled institutes in India conducting over 280 short, medium, and long-term courses. The training program is demand-driven, and the subjects selected are of critical importance to the partner countries. The courses have been divided into 7 broad categories. The first is accounts, audit, banking, and finance courses. Second is IT, telecommunication, and English courses. Third is management courses. Fourth is a very important sector, small and medium enterprises and rural development courses. Fifth are some specialized courses. Then there are technical courses, and finally we also have environment and renewable energy courses. As the Joint Secretary from the Ministry of External Affairs mentioned in the morning, he gave some very impressive figures. In 2012-2013, over 10,000 men and women from our friendly partner countries were trained in India under this program. At the request of partners, sometimes special courses are also organized from time to time. The training part of ITEC also has a defense component. This covers training of Army, Navy, and Air Force officers nominated by the partner countries in India's institutions, prestigious institutions like the National Defense College and Defense Services Staff College. Now let's look at the effectiveness of the ITEC program. There are some drawbacks as far as project-related activities are concerned, But even very objective critics have praised the capacity building aspect of high-tech. One of the main reasons for the success is the similarity of socio-economic conditions prevailing in India and the partner countries, which helps in finding similar solutions to similar problems. There are a whole range of indirect benefits from the high-tech program. The most important is the expression of India's soft power. The men and women trained under high-tech program become important bridges of friendship which lasts for decades. Many trainees have gone on to become ministers or risen to top posts in their respective fields. For example, in Botswana today, half of the top brass in the defense establishment have been trained under the high-tech program. The former president of Nigeria, President Olusegun Obasanjo, was also trained in India. These high-tech trainees are a huge reservoir of goodwill the world over. Over the years, India has also fine-tuned the high-tech program to make it more efficient and result-oriented. One of the changes, of course, is last year a new division called the Development Partnership Administration, or DPA, was established in MEA to streamline the high-tech activities. India has also started establishing training centers in partner countries. In addition to training them here, we have centers in partner countries, and there are almost 100 such institutes which are to be established in Africa alone. September 15 is an important day for high-tech. It has been declared as the high-tech day, where Indian missions abroad organize receptions to get all the high-tech alumni together. I'll end by saying that capacity building will be the most crucial factor for the developing countries in the years to come. For example, according to a 2010 McKinsey report, it is estimated that by 2040, Africa will have more than 1 billion people in the working age. By that time, the rest of the world would have aged populations, which means that most of the economic activities, particularly manufacturing, will have to shift to Africa. To exploit this potential, the time to act is now, so that we create a generation of skilled human resources. This was reflected in Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's address at the first India-Africa Forum Summit in Delhi in 2008, when he said, and I quote, "Both India and Africa are blessed with young populations. It is only by investing in creative energies of our youth that the potential of our partnership will be fulfilled," unquote. Thank you for your attention.
Some questions, or let it be? I was thinking, you all listened to three speakers so patiently. I would be happy if students have some questions or few observations to make, because you have been at the receiving end all the time. Few observations I would entertain and then sum up so that it will be participatory. So anybody wants to say something, everybody of course is welcome. There are distinguished people like Ambassador Dehre or everybody is there. They can also, but students, if they have to say something, they are welcome. Doesn't look like. They're tired. Well. Yes. Oh, good. Some question is there.
Thank you very much. I have one observation or question to Excellence the Ambassador, considering that he knows Africa very well. Excellency, I'm from Mozambique Embassy. I'm the first secretary. Since we are in university, I have a question. As you see, India is becoming, as my deputy minister said in the morning, a great partner of Mozambique. But there are some challenges we are facing. The cooperation with the Indian private companies are going very well. We have Tata Steel, we have Jindal. In less than 1 year, they already operated in the coal sectors and the other areas. But some problems with public company, I don't want to mention. With public companies, we have some concerns. So I would like to listen how we can make it more fast so that we can reach the new paradigm.
Yeah. I am glad you asked that question. Am I audible? When you talk of public companies, the decision making becomes more difficult because government is involved. Then there are some very big contracts and other things which need even cabinet decisions. So it does take time. But the silver lining in the whole thing is, unlike, for example, China, India-Africa cooperation in the years to come will be mainly private sector driven. So as you very rightly said, that since you are happy with cooperation with the private sector, in fact that will be the route for greater and greater India-Africa cooperation. Because public sector companies in India are, first of all, not in most of the sectors. And entrepreneurship and new technology sectors are all with the private sector. So I think the private sector will be leading the way. But if you can actually specify which are the problems with the public companies, maybe not openly, if you want we can have a discussion. And we can, what we can do is we can recommend to the government your concerns. In fact, I think that one of the aims of this interaction, which Symbiosis University has organized, is to take such concerns and through proper channel we could pass on these concerns to the concerned authorities of the government.
Now there is kind of paucity of time, so at the most we can take only one question. If there's some other program lined up for you, and if there's no question, I'll just sum up and quickly honor all the speaker today. Well, I take that there is nothing.
Hello. Yeah.
Only last question now. Last. Yeah.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I'm Ved Srinivas, Assistant Professor, SIMC Bangalore. I want to ask all the panelists, which is the prime mover of education sector in international communities like Africa and Asia? Is it the markets or the lack of vocational courses, or is it the real academic education itself? So.
Well, hello. Does it work? Well, I think the most important aspect which stimulates and spurs interaction between two countries in terms of collaboration is economic growth and economic interest. I think that is number one. Like I mentioned, education system in our India, in our country itself, it is, of course, the government put in a lot of money, but it is more a function of the economy. Economy grows, everybody grows. So if there is a vibrant commerce happening, a vibrant business happening between two countries, definitely for the transfer of technology, there would be more demand, and that would be a robust basis for its sustained growth. And I think, for example, IT is one area where we can really collaborate in a very strong way because India has credentials for that. So I think economy is the main engine of growth, I feel. This is what I feel.
Thank you very much. I would take 2 of your minutes and then we'll honor the speakers. You will all agree that we had a very interesting session today. Particularly Burundi's strategy was well worked out and laid out before us, and we can see a new country which is entering the portals of generally higher education in the mid-60s. How interesting progress it is making. And that was clear from Honorable Minister's presentation. As far as Ashok Thakurji is concerned, one point which is always asked of him, a question asked of him is, Indian universities do not stand in the first 200 universities. Sometimes I feel that this is a very unfair question. Because Paris University was established in 1090. It's the oldest surviving university. After that, Oxford came in 1096. They have gone through several traditions, ups and downs, and maintained themselves. To compare such universities with universities in India somewhere doesn't sound very kind of fair. That is one sure point, and I would give many intellectual reasons for it. And at the same time, somewhere, universities in India, public or private, have to perhaps undergo reforms. Certain strict measures are required because somewhere, unfortunately, and he's Education Secretary, I'm feeling shy to state it, but I'm being bold, that they somewhere resemble sick public sector universities. There's cynicism, there is no accountability, more and more people, less and less work in many public institutions, and somewhere we have to tide over this. How will it happen that excessive politicization of universities, all this is required for internationalization of education, and how it will be translated on the ground, it's a challenge of all teachers as well as vice chancellors who run it. The second thing that I thought I would say is Ambassador Vishwanathan really supplemented many things with Ambassador Shyam Saran stated in the morning, but this was another flare of, in a way, India is moving across in different parts, and somewhere maybe President of Nigeria is our ambassador there, ex-president of Nigeria, and many of you will kind of acquire important positions when you go back, and I hope you carry pleasant memories about India and higher education that you earned here. I think with these words, I would again like to thank all of you who kind of listened to us very patiently. I would like to congratulate Vice Chancellor Dr. Gupte for making this event so interesting, and also Chancellor Mazumdar to be always a visionary, and this is one of the best events I have ever attended in my kind of lifetime in India. And I feel extremely proud that this particular event, which was so well organized by Ambassador Devre, Dr. Mazumdar and Dr. Gupte or Dr. Vidya, happened in Pune, my hometown. Somewhere, there is something which is additional reason to feel proud about. And that you have 3,000 students on the campus who are, from different parts of the world, and that was also so interesting to see. I think many times people in the capital seem or look very provincial. They don't know how silent revolutions are occurring in other parts of the country. Delhi is quite provincial in that sense. So, I am very happy. I would like to congratulate the organizers and thank you profusely for bearing with me for some more time. Thank you very much indeed. Now we'll honor the...
Thank you, sir, for conducting the session. May I now request Professor Rajen Harshe to felicitate the dignitaries on the dais. Thank you, sir. I would request Dr. Rajni Gupte, Vice Chancellor, Symbiosis International University, to kindly felicitate Professor Rajen Harshe. Thank you, ma'am. We hope you could relate to the deliberations held in the sessions today. We look forward to see you tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. so that we can start the sessions on time.